Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Latino Free Minds podcast, your home for bold conversations grounded in faith and fueled by a passion for truth. I'm fired up today because we're relaunching something truly special, our Know Your Candidate series, where we're sitting down with some of the men running to be California's next governor. Now, let me tell you something straight from the heart. California, our beautiful golden state, is worth fighting for. It's worth saving. Packing up and leaving? That's not who we are. We're a people of resilience, of hope, and unwavering faith. And we're not giving up on this place we call home. Here at Latino Free Minds, we're rooted in our Christian values, faith, hope, and charity. These aren't just words to us. They're the guiding light for how we live, how we love, and how we lead. Over the next few weeks, we're bringing you face-to-face with the candidates who want to steer California's future. Our mission? To dig deep, ask the tough questions, and give you the clarity you need to make the best choice for your family, your community, and your faith. This isn't about politics as usual. It's about finding leaders who share our values, who see California not just as a state, but as a home filled with families, dreams, and God-given potential. We believe that when you listen to these conversations, you'll be empowered to vote with your heart and your conscience, grounded in the principles that matter most: faith in God, hope for a better tomorrow, and charity toward one another. California's future is in our hand, and together we can choose a path that honors our families, strengthens our communities, and reflects the love and truth we hold dear. So grab a seat, open your heart, and join us for these powerful Know Your Candidate episodes. Let's shine a light, lift our voices, and show the world that California is worth fighting for. Stay with us. This is going to be a journey you don't want to miss. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Latino Free Minds, episode 113. And give me 1 second there. Sorry about that. Anywho, sorry about that. And we're here for another episode of Know Your Candidate. And so for us, this is very important because this is our moment. Our state is vibrant, diverse, innovative, but it faces challenges that demand bold, honest leadership. From skyrocketing cost of living to wildfire and water shortages, we're at a crossroads. We are Latino Free Minds, and we want to help restore the California dream for every family, worker, and dreamer. We believe in practical solutions, cutting red tape to build affordable housing, investing in our natural resources to secure our future, and ensuring our schools prepare kids for tomorrow's jobs. We're not here to play politics. We're here to listen, unite, and deliver results. Together, we'll make California a place where opportunity thrives again. So let's do this. Today, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Danny and Gio. We're also joined by guest host, Daniel Silva. He was instrumental in getting all these interviews scheduled, and this process has been a true partnership. So before we start, we also want to thank the people that are streaming this on their accounts. So we appreciate you for your willingness to help out and hear these candidates out. And to get to today, we are joined by David Serpa. He is a 2026 gubernatorial candidate. I think this is the proper way to say it. And we're glad that you could come on, that you're giving us some of your time to hear you out, what you're about. And, that's our goal here, is to get to know all our candidates before we decide, who we're going to vote for.
Well, hey, good evening, gents. I appreciate that you guys are starting the dialogue and that you are hosting all of these people, because it's so important to have these conversations and not have them censored, not have them put down by the sort of mainstream media and the establishment and the Republican Party, because we, the people, are the one who are going to choose our candidates, not the establishment. And I think that sometimes they need to be reminded of that.
Yeah, that's true. And that's part of the reason we're doing that, right? It's unfiltered talk, and we get to know you. So with that being said, I guess we could get into the first question of, who is David Serpa?
Good to join you guys. I appreciate you, three Daniels and Gio. Good to see all you guys.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's David Serpa. I was born in the Bay Area in San Jose, moved inland to Fresno, was raised in the Sierra Nevadas in El Dorado County, which is where I graduated from high school. And then I moved southern to San Diego, where I did some college. I did some professional theater. Eventually, I moved to LA, where I worked in film and television. And then I went to a Memorial Day celebration where my sister, who is a combat veteran and served in Iraq, helped me to attend there. And then I went and I was blown away by everything. And up until that point, I had been regurgitating a lot of talking points about the war. And so I enlisted in the infantry. And 5 months later, I was at boot camp at Camp Pendle or at MCRD. And then I served the Marine Corps. I ended up becoming a machine gunner, deployed to Afghanistan, got out of the Marine Corps and got into real estate. And that's really where I grew my business and kind of grew my name for myself here locally.
Cool. No, well, thank you for joining us, David. We really do appreciate it. One of the things that, as Daniel mentioned, is that we started Get to Know Your Candidates in the Fighter Series and stuff like that because a lot of people weren't focusing on local candidates and local races that go on near us. We just everybody would be talking about the big ones like, presidential candidacies and stuff like that.
That's right.
So I think a lot of people don't realize how much it affects us even more, the local races. So one of the questions that we wanted to ask you to start off is everybody knows that California is either the fourth or fifth largest economy in the world. And tell us how you would be, what would qualify you to govern California?
Sure. It's the fourth largest economy in the world. And so you would think that California is doing so well, but it doesn't really seem that Californians are really doing very well. I made my way through real estate and through the Marine Corps. I learned how to operate a business by, being a part of an infantry unit. And ultimately, I implemented those skills to grow my real estate business, grow a couple of different companies. And I was exposed to a lot of different industries, including the film industry throughout my career. And so I want to pull all of that together and look at California with my 3 points. I feel like I'm specially designed to help people focus on safety, development, and dividends. Safety being, cleaning up our streets, bringing back institutions so that these people who are struggling have a place to go. Bringing back development. We have 48 million public acres in the state of California and a lack of housing and a lack of infrastructure. Why are we not building if we know that real estate creates dividends? And then finally, if we're going to audit government spending, which anybody who's ran a business in the real world knows that you cannot constantly be moving forward without auditing your own business, without figuring out where the money is going. And so part of the journey is surrounding yourself with people that are great at doing things like that, at auditing government spending. And so I would look to, find people who are better than me in the ways in which I lack so that we can focus on development, invest in things that yield a dividend so that we're not constantly operating in the red. And in fact, we could look at things like oil and energy and water and agriculture as something that we can spend enough money on to a point that helps us get out of the red and get so far into the green that we're issuing dividend checks to Californians based on our productivity as an economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is something that already happens. The Saudi Arabians, they have an oil dividend. They're the 29th largest economy in the world. The Alaskans pay out an oil dividend. They don't even have income tax. We have deeper oil reserves. We have more oil infrastructure, and yet we aren't drilling in a way that would produce enough to where we can export and then get money back to people. And then finally, we have native tribes throughout the state of California that are paying out a dividend based on their casino revenue. Why can we not do the same thing in the fourth largest economy, balance our books, cut our spending in the age of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and to cut redundancies and get government, not just something that constantly operates on a red that depends on more taxes and more tax revenue, but something that operates in the green so that we can become financially productive.
David, thank you for joining us today on Latino Free Minds. Something that I've been pushing in lately or saying lately is that somebody that I would love to see take on this role is somebody that's going to stand up for us up in Sacramento statewide. And you hit some key points, and somebody that will stand up for us is somebody that's going to go in and really audit where our money is going. And a key area, a key factor that everybody seems to be talking about today are gas prices.
Mm-hmm.
How knowledgeable are you on how the taxes associated with gas taxes work and what needs to change?
Mm-hmm. So a couple of different things. Auditing government spending, a lot of people say Doge California, but auditing government spending in the state of California is actually a job. That's the job of the state controller, whose name is Malia Cohen, who should be auditing government spending and should be finding where the PPP money is, where the bridge to nowhere money is, where our water infrastructure money is, all things that we voted for that now we're spending and now we don't know where the money is, where the money is for over 50% of our budget, which goes to educate our children. But sorry to go off on a tangent there about the controller and about auditing government spending, but it really isn't just Governor Newsom who's a failure. It's everybody around him. And that's what I feel like part of this education process is what is a treasurer? What is a controller? What is the Secretary of State? What are they supposed to be doing? You started off this conversation by talking about the local races that you guys were paying attention to. We don't win if the governor wins, but we don't win in the Senate, in the Assembly, and in the down ticket races. It will just be another lame duck governor like we had in Governor Schwarzenegger. But I'm sorry, I didn't get to the second part of your question. Can you remind me what that was, Gio?
What needs to change about these gas prices?
What needs to change about the gas prices? So chapter 1 of my book is about oil and energy, or excuse me, water and energy. Now, we have some of the deepest oil reserves in the world. In fact, Los Angeles is built on oil reserves. I don't have a lot of compassion in me at this point for these oil companies that are getting rich throughout the world by nationalizing their resources, taking over their resources, and then getting rich off of people. While people are fighting and dying throughout the world, the oil companies have been getting rich. So I could tell you that we shouldn't just be asking for $3 gasoline. It should be $2 gasoline. When I was going to high school 20 years ago, gasoline was 98 cents a gallon. What changed? Other than the rapid devaluation of our dollar. But the way that capitalism works is if a product is expensive, you introduce more product into the market in order to bring down the price of that product. And that's what we should be doing with oil and gasoline. And instead, we've shut down 2 more oil refineries in the state of California. So the California Coastal Commission is ran by the state treasurer. This is part of the reason why we need to have a solid state treasurer who's on board, because they're in charge of the oil and gas leases. And we have over 200,000 acres where there are 600 active oil and gas permits. Why are we leasing all of that out instead of just drilling for it, tapping into it? Because right now we're paying taxes on it and we're paying the oil companies for it. If the oil and gas companies can't figure it out, they can't figure it out quickly because we've privatized everything in this country and over commoditized everything in this country, then it might be time for California to nationalize the oil and gas industry so that we can make it a cheap, abundant resource for the people and then build a bridge to an abundant nuclear future. Kamala Harris said in the past, wars were fought over oil, but in the future, wars will be fought over water. I don't want to live in either one of those futures. I want to understand that in Kern County, we have some of the deepest oil reserves in the world. In Los Angeles, we have some of the deepest oil reserves in the world. I'm sick of our politicians, our government, and the oil companies getting rich while the people are bled out for their energy.
I got the next question. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Silvis.
Serpa, I've known you for a while. You're a great man. If you win the governor race, what issue becomes your priority on day one?
Sure. And this is the thing. We could walk and chew gum at the same time. The Marine Corps did not make me a sniper, where I focus on 1 or 2 issues at a time. It made me a machine gunner. It's accuracy by volume. We should be focusing heavily on safety, of course. Law and order is the foundation with which any society is built upon. If you don't have law and order, you don't have anything. The second thing is development. We have 48 million acres in the state of California. I want to focus on developing some of that land. Now, the city of Sacramento is a 60,000 acre city that has 200,000 homes. The city of San Francisco is a 30,000 acre city that has 419,000 homes. We could build 5 new cities throughout the state of California with 200,000 homes each, which would bring us to 1 million new homes, and then add 1.5 million single family homes to existing cities, not more high density housing, but single family homes. And that way we bring down the cost of housing. And then third is dividends. I want to focus on cutting down on government spending, bureaucracies, and administrative overhead, streamlining government through technology. Governor Newsom wrote a book when he was lieutenant governor, and it was called Citizenville. And I've read it. It wasn't that good, but I read it. I read it so you don't have to. And in it, he says there should be an app for that. So I want to streamline government so that, there's an app for a lot of these government agencies so that you don't have to go to the DMV all the time. Other states, it's a drive-through DMV. A lot of states, a lot of this stuff is happening online. Why are we not, in the technology capital of the world, not handling a lot of these issues online? So safety is first and foremost. And then, of course, development, making it possible for people to have affordable places for their children to be moving to, and more opportunities for them in those communities.
Cool.
A lot of people don't realize about California is up until the 1968, for the first 100 years, the university system in the state of California was free. It was free. And that's when we were thriving. And that's when we were having some of the best years in America, is not when we made education a scarcity issue. And that's what we've done with a lot of this stuff. We've over commoditized everything. We shut down nuclear power facilities, which drove up the cost of energy. We shut down desalination plants, which sent up the cost of water. We made it impossible for insurance to practice here with, Ricardo Lara, the insurance commissioner, and the California Fair Plan. So it's impossible for insurance and driving up the cost of insurance. And so there's all of these ways that government has created scarcity. Instead of banking on abundance, we're trying to squeeze every last penny out of everyone. And we're all starting to feel like wage slaves and like serfs and like we don't own anything. We don't own our homes. We own home loans. And if we even pay off our home, we have to pay property taxes indefinitely, at 2% of the value of the home annually. It's wild what has happened to the American people in the freest country on earth, where we have bled for freedom throughout the world, and yet we have been deprived of it here at home.
Yeah, no, that's valid. And you did mention education, and that was actually, the next question is,
Dive in.
Our goal in California should be the best state in education and not ranking, I believe, 44th in the country.
Yep.
How do we get that done? How do we go from 44 to number 1?
It's a beautiful question. So the superintendent of public instruction is going to be extraordinarily important. And unfortunately, we have a fight to take with our teachers unions because the teachers unions spend more money lobbying politicians than the oil companies do. And unless you're willing to come out the gate and say, hey, listen, we need to revitalize education by bringing a Golden State school choice voucher into our schools to allow parents to decide which public school, private school, charter school, or homeschool they want to spend their voucher on. We could develop a voucher system, and it would work the same way that Milton Friedman designed the GI Bill to work. It voucherizes education, incentivizes parents to be involved in that education so that they're in the driver's seat. And then if a school is not doing a great job educating our children, we don't have to wait for standardized tests. Parents know when schools are failing. And if you don't educate, you incarcerate. We don't lead the world in education. We don't have the best educated children with the best teachers in the best education system in the world. In fact, like you said, we're 44th in our country. And if we were spending over 50% of the state budget and we had the best paid teachers, the best educated children, and the best school system in the world, I don't think a parent would bat an eye at it. But we don't. We're failing across the board. And so by voucherizing education, putting parents in the driver's seat, and then bringing trades, certificate programs, and licensing programs into the schools so that when our kids are graduating, they're not just getting a diploma in their hand, they're getting a license, a certificate, or graduating from a program that helps them to enter into the trades so that they can start their lives. And that's not what we're doing right now. In fact, what we're doing is we're not educating them. We're putting it on higher education. So then that way they have to go in and pay for getting caught up. And most of these people do, most of our children are not graduating from college. And if they are graduating from college, the job often isn't there for them. And so if you look throughout the world at what's being done, first off, they're not making mandatory education for 13 years. Some of the best education systems in the world have mandatory education for 9 years, where they focus on general education, and then they have specialized education in college. And that's what we would benefit from. We don't need to have longer school days and add more school years to our children's lives. We need to allow them to be children, cut down on the amount of hours that they're attending in the beginning, incentivize things like, we need more doctors, we need more engineers, we need people to go to school that actually are going to use their degree in a way that serves their community or enriches themselves. But currently, we're saying, oh, well, tough. You have a bunch of student loan debt. Tough on you. You should have made a better financial decision. Well, the federal government, who guarantees the funding of education, which is why all the banks invest in it and the foreign money invests in it. In fact, it was just released that China put $200 million into UC Berkeley. Why are our university systems not serving our children and our communities? In fact, another one up in Northern California, one of the colleges, they found that 1/4 of the students were Chinese nationals. And so a lot of these people that are being educated in the California university public system are not even from California. A lot of them are not from this country. And it's because of the way that education is funded in the bond program that more people are buying bonds in education because it's federally backed by the government. It's considered a safe investment. And then you can't default out of student loans. And they're not investing in the state of California. So we're creating wage slaves and debt slaves out of our children. Our education system is not being fixed, but this is not something that the governor can do alone. We need a superintendent of public instruction, which right now that's Tony Thurmond, who thinks he did such a great job at educating our children that he deserves to run for governor. And he's a total failure as the superintendent of public instruction. And it's also going to take a lieutenant governor, because it's actually the lieutenant governor that oversees the university system, the California State College system, and the junior college system.
How do we make that happen? We're talking about knowing your candidates. Are these positions something that they run for, or are they nominated by someone? Are they nominated by the governor? How do they get to that point?
So that's a beautiful question. So first off, these candidates, you go and you pull paperwork that allows you to fundraise. But the filing deadline doesn't even come until November. And in fact, today is 1 year until Election Day. Exactly. Today is. Mm-hmm. And so there's plenty of time. And in fact, what we need is we need people to run for not just their local school board, their city council, and their county supervisor. We need 7 more people to run for executive branch seats. We need the treasurer, that's the California's bank. We need the controller, which is going to audit the state of California. We need the superintendent of public instruction, who is responsible for our education system in elementary, middle school, and upper school, as well as adult programs and child care programs. We need our attorney general, who's in charge of protecting Californians and their rights. We need our insurance commissioner, who's in charge of making sure that insurance can practice in the state of California, which is about 7 to 10% of our total economy. And then we need our lieutenant governor, who oversees the school systems and on the university level, plus foreign business from state to out of country. And we need a great secretary of state who's in charge of elections, plus they're in charge of the business, management, and foreign relations from state to state and state to out of country. So we need great executive branch members, plus we need members to run for the Senate and the Assembly, Because if we have a governor that wins who's a Republican governor, but we don't have a great executive branch, right now we have 0% of the executive branch, we have 22% of the Senate, and we have 23% of the assembly, which of course is not going to do, because the governor is responsible for appointing over 500 positions immediately when they get in, plus about 11 to 14 judges annually. So it's extraordinarily important. But there are things that you could do on a county level. In your county, with your local school board, you can implement a voucher program already. And there are school boards that already do this, that allow from school to school. You could have, transfers from school to school within the district. And a great movie for all parents to go out and watch to understand how this system works is called Waiting for Superman. And that explains a lot about these charter programs and a lot about what they tried to do with this gal named Michelle out in New York. She tried to take on the teachers union in New York. She said, we will make you the highest paid teachers in the country. You'll make over $160,000 a year, but you have to vote to allow us to fire bad teachers. Because right now, about 1 in 62 doctors will have their license suspended throughout the course of their career, but about 1 in every 2,300 tenured teachers will have their license suspended throughout their career. So we just need to have standards, and we need to be okay with enforcing those standards within our education system. Is that too much?
No, I got one. I, I got one. So I don't know if you're aware, David, that the president of the United States actually tried to get a hold of the California governor, Gavin Newsom, recently. And our Democrat governor, did not want to answer the phone call of an American president. That pissed me off. But the phone call was regarding, it touched a little bit of education in schools, but mostly about women's rights.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly with Title IX, with federal guideline Title IX regarding women's in sports and women's rights. So, how you as governor, how would you conduct yourself differently in that situation if you were California governor?
So first off, communication is key. And the Title IX issue, it shouldn't even be an issue at this point. Shouldn't even be something that we're talking about. I feel like it brings all of us back, and it brings us into this muck where we're never agreeing about anything. It brings out all the radicals, and it turns our school board meetings into combative situations because we're not handling leadership at the top. We don't have someone who has it on their desk that says the buck stops here. And so if you're going to be frustrated with the governor, it's okay if you're frustrated with the governor. We don't want it being taken out on children in the school system. We don't want these individual children being highlighted because the governor was being unwilling to do his job. And so when you look at a lot of this stuff, if you're being angered and turned against people who make less money than you, then they might not be the problem. The leadership might be the problem. And so Governor Newsom, and I wrote about this in my book. It's a two volumes. It's called Common Sense for California, A Guide to the New Revolution. I wrote it during COVID. It's 20 chapters on how we fix the state of California, and it gives deep history lessons for why things are the way that they are currently and how we can fix them. Now, Governor Newsom specifically said, and I quoted him in my book, that we should not be sparring partners in a court of law, but we should be able to communicate with one another. And yet he sets aside $48 million in a legal fund to sue President Trump instead of cooperating with his system federally. And the problem is we as Californians are the largest contributor to federal income taxes in the country by about $60 billion. We contribute $334 billion annually to the federal government. And how much of that comes back to the state of California? Right? And so I'm very frustrated with the rapid devaluation of our dollar because it creates unsafe markets. It creates a system where people only invest in speculation, and it's a rapid devaluation of our dollar. We fund 73% of the world's authoritarian dictatorships. We have a Department of Defense that we haven't audited, 7 times in a row. and it's failed the audit 7 times in a row, unable to account for 61% of $3.5 trillion in weapons, assets, and liquid capital throughout the globe. And for me, as a Californian who's a combat vet, I look at it and I think, okay, I'm anti-war. I hate that we're constantly battling with our neighbors, but it's not enough to be anti something. You have to be pro something. And I want to be pro the creation of California instead of pro the destruction of our neighbors. I don't think that we as Californians want to be meddling in the rest of the world, sending billions of our dollars to, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine, Yemen, Saudi Arabia. We're tired of this sort of stuff. We want to see California do well. We want to see America first. And not only do we want to see America first, we want to see someone who's brave enough to say California first. We have 40 million people in the state of California, and it's time that we start prioritizing them as the largest economy in this country.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think Danny did want to have a follow-up question to what you
Sure.
said.
No, it was just because it's a really good segue about funds onto this question right here. So, as residents of California and after being under a one-party rule for decades, or sometimes it seems longer than that, do you feel that the California GOP is really using the funds that they raise to actually win races? Because it doesn't, outside looking in, it sure doesn't look like it.
So I can tell you that the person that is now responsible for that was just elected treasurer to the California GOP. His name is Jack Guerrero, and he is, essentially auditing the CA GOP right now. But I want him to audit the state of California. So I've called Jack, and I'll just go ahead and I'll put my name on it. I've met with Jack. I've been calling him. I want him to be the controller, because I'm less interested in auditing the CA GOP, which is in many ways a failed organization, and I'm more interested in auditing the Democratic Party and their monopoly that they have over the state of California and in every major city throughout the state. Then we're going to find our money. Now, as far as the CA GOP goes, there's a reason why you guys were talking about hosting debates, why other organizations are talking about hosting debates. And that's because we are sick and tired of the failed leadership from the CA GOP, the lack of debate, the lack of conversation. We are not the Democratic Party that rigs primaries like they did in 2016, like they did in 2020, like they did in 2024 to not allow a dialogue. Innovation does not exist inside of a monopoly. But someone once said, I don't care who is president as long as I get to choose the nominees. And that's essentially what we have with the CA GOP and a lot of the local central committees is instead of a California Republican Party that is encouraging the participation in those who want to run for office and encouraging a dialogue and recruiting members to run for office, we are often just running whoever the cat drags in or whoever the selected member of the good old boys club is. And so there's a lot of gatekeeping that happens right now on a state level and on a local level. I can tell you in my own situation that, hey, you should back out and endorse this person, or you should back out and endorse that person. The difficult thing is even when I was going to run for Congress, I went in the first time and I said, hey, my name is David Serpa and I live in Congressman Calvert's district and I want to primary Congressman Calvert. And they said, well, will you run in this district that you don't live in order to run against a Democrat, even though it's a D plus 27 district? And so the thing is they move these things around and they discourage people from running. They don't give them good advice. They turn them on to this sort of political consultant class. And the political consultant class often ends up determining who our nominees are. They're the ones that are getting rich no matter who wins, and there's, every single one of them will tell you 6 ways to Sunday about how they'll get paid. And so the consultants are not doing anyone any favors right now. And in fact, I kind of want to expose something a little bit. I know for a fact the political consultant class is the one that is discouraging the idea of us candidates getting together and running together to do what happened in Texas in 1994, because we could flip an entire state. We could flip the entire state of California if we were willing to work together. And how do I know this? Because it's happened before. In 1994, there were only 3 Republican governors in the first 180 years of Texas's history. But what happened was Karl Rove, the architect, got together with George Bush. They targeted the executive branch, plus they called them the Texas 25 Senate and Assembly members, so that they can flip Texas in one election cycle and maintain control, flipping it from a blue state to a red state. Of those 25 seats, they were able to flip 23 of them in one election cycle, and Texas has been red ever since. And so what I've been trying to tell the political consultant class is we need a great treasurer, we need a great controller, a superintendent of public instruction, an insurance commissioner, and everybody just wants to stay in their own lane. And they keep telling us, and they told me, you want to be the only Republican that's electable in the state of California. You want people that voted for Katie Porter and Adam Schiff to vote for you. And I tell them, no, if that's how this happens, we already lose before we get in through the front door. So we have to start locking arms with other Republicans. We have to start promoting one another. And we have to start locking eyes on the enemy, which is the failed leadership behind the Democratic Party. Not Democrats, not our neighbors, but their failed leadership, which has destroyed the state from the bottom to the top and in every major city.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And to the point you were saying, and why we started doing this is, we didn't really see it happening. You just kind of end up with the final 2 candidates, and it's like, all right, pick one, but it's like, what happened to everybody else? I didn't get to hear from this guy or that guy.
That's it.
And, we've said it before with all the candidates that we've had on, the past election cycle, was debates should be mandatory. Because I know there was certain races where it's like, no, that other person doesn't want to debate me. Well, why not? That person's been in office for like 30 years. They right. should be able to, battle some ideas out.
You can't drain half a swamp, my brother. And so the problem is all these different political types, they say, oh, well, I don't have to debate. And so what had happened was, in the year that I originally decided to run as an independent, and I didn't end up getting enough signatures because I was told you could only turn in a max of 60. And that's not the case. It's another one of those ways that they gatekeep. An entire election cycle was lost because of it. But what had happened was, I have realized the amount of gatekeeping that goes into deciding who the candidates are going to be that the Republican Party supports, and who it's not just the Republican Party, it's also the media, right? So you guys are doing an incredibly important thing by going out, seeking out the people that are running, getting all of them on your show. And I could tell you, as the first person that's been on, I would 100% come back. I would be happy to come back if you guys were to host a debate, whether it's in person or online. And I know a lot of the other candidates would feel the same way.
Cool. No, yeah, I mean, that's something, if we were able to pull that off, I'd be stoked about that. But yeah, we'd be down. There'd be what do you call it? We wouldn't be against it here. So yeah, anybody else listening wants to come on, do that. I'm glad to know that you're ready for it. That's good. Before I throw it to Gio for his next question, we did get one question from one of the viewers, and her question was, what first steps will you take to better the economy in California?
Sure. So make it possible for business to exist in the state of California. Some of the best things that government needs to do is stop with the massive overregulation that businesses have to experience in the state of California. I mean, you take my own industry, for example. If you want to develop in the state of California, even Katie Porter was talking about this. It takes 3 years longer to develop in the state of California than it does to develop in the state of Texas. And that's because of CEQA. That's because of the EPA. And that's because of the real estate Gestapo and all of their bureaucratic red tape, or as I've been encouraged to call it, blue tape in the state of California that prevents people from being successful. Now, what's happened is the California as an agriculture state, and I lived in Fresno, like a couple of you guys live in Fresno. I know it's an agriculture state. We don't have to have someone else tell us this is an agriculture state. We've seen it, and we've driven up and down the 5 as they have intentionally dried out our farms by, we've seen food grows where water flows. Well, that was intentional. We voted for $7.9 billion in water infrastructure a few years ago, which was Proposition 1. And then what happened was that money was spent, but no results were delivered. And in fact, they continue to dry up farmland on purpose and then privatize the water rights to like the Resnick family, which I think has about $250 billion, 250 billion gallons annually in California water that they have bought rights to in a closed door meeting in the Bay Area. So what can I do? Make it possible for our farmers to feed the world again. We used to feed the world with our agriculture. Make it possible for our tech industry to lead the world again, as we once did by investing in the infrastructure possible to support artificial intelligence. Third, make it possible for us to entertain the world again, because we had film and television for years and we've been losing it rapidly to other states and to other countries because our government refuses to properly incentivize the largest industry, and because we've been losing billions of dollars in tax revenue every year to other states and other countries. And then fourth is bring back manufacturing to the state of California, even if a lot of that's being ran by technology, because it brings a further export. So by investing properly in water and energy, we can empower Californians to do everything else. But government just needs to get out of the way of the private sector and allow them to conduct business in the way that they need to. And in order to do that, we have to provide the basics, things like water and energy. We shut down nuclear power facilities like we did in San Onofre, and we're scheduling to shut down Diablo Canyon. Well, what's happened to your energy bill? We shut down 2 oil refineries. Well, what's happened to your energy bill? We shut down all this water infrastructure when we have 1 trillion gallons of water that spills out into the Delta every year that could be funneled down south. But, just as long as, Governor Newsom and Congresswoman Pelosi still have plump jack in their vineyards with abundant water, they're not worried about the rest of the farmers down south because they've never been pushed out of business. So there's a lot that we could do in the state of California to encourage the economy to grow further. And what we need to do is we need to develop the infrastructure to support that. And then third, probably fifth and last and finally is, as a real estate guy, massive development would bring so many jobs to the economy by just selling off public land. And like I said, you could build 5 new cities, 60,000 acres apiece, which is the size of Sacramento. And we would still have 47,700,000 acres of public land in the state of California. And it would bring down the cost of housing for everybody and bring jobs to the state of California. So, and we give our children a community that they could buy into so that they don't have to leave California for an opportunity to purchase the American dream.
Agreed. And David, you brought up a very important topic that's in today's headlines: artificial intelligence.
Yes.
So, growing up as a millennial in California, I've always grew up in technology around computers. I believe my generation was the first generation, our generation, with computers, internet, etc. So for many years, California was the leader in the world with Silicon Valley and technology. And it's been pretty sad that we, as state government, they let it not let that go to China, Russia, etc. You as a governor, what are your plans to reinvigorate Silicon Valley, make California the tech capital of the world again, lead venture capital in tech, and also we want to know your personal opinion of what you think about artificial intelligence and the importance of California and America to be the world's #1 and beat China and Russia regarding that. Okay, thank you.
So I could tell you, great question. A lot of the people that I'm talking to that are very interested in my campaign are looking at the 2 front runners, and they're starting to look at me as the top tier of the second tier candidates. And that's no slight to any of the other candidates. That's just what they're sort of telling me. And so what they're doing is they're starting to find where the talent is, what their ideas are, who can carry some water. And so as a real estate guy, I attract a lot of real estate guys that are interested in development, but I also attract a lot of tech guys. See, I'm a fellow millennial. I just turned 40 in February. and I guess I can't say just anymore. I'm soundly 40, and so I grew up with tech as well. And when I read Governor Newsom's book, Citizenville, I read somebody who glimpsed at the future but couldn't quite understand it the way that our generation inherently understands it because we're millennials. Now the thing is Governor Newsom is a boomer, like President Trump is a boomer, like the three presidents before him, Obama, was a boomer, Bush was a boomer, and so the boomer generation is sort of held on to power for a long time, but their grasp on what people are actually going through that have families, that have children, and also technology is just not in step with the rest of us. And so, bless his heart, I think, Governor Newsom was born in the 1960s, but he writes in his book the tragedy about legacy media companies or legacy technology companies that were able to purchase 100-year contracts in the city of San Francisco early on to be a provider because he wanted to provide free Wi-Fi for the city of San Francisco, which is something that's easy. That would be easily implementable, but he was unable to do it because of these legacy contracts. And so a lot of these legacy contracts that are holding us back need to be reevaluated. And we also need to start imagining a government of the future. California should lead the way when it comes to technology. We've always led the way when it comes to technology. But what's happened is you've seen development in Tennessee by Sam's large AI company. You've seen Elon's large AI company have massive investments in West Texas, but they don't have decentralized grids. And West Texas doesn't have the sort of abundance of water that we have. So California could lead with AI far into the future. And I would love to lead with AI to streamline the redundancies in bureaucracy and administrative overhead in government and give the people an opportunity to imagine what a post-work society might look like, because we're getting ready to oversee over the course of the next 3 to 5 years the largest termination of employment in probably world history, because we're heading into the fourth industrial revolution. The time in between the industrial revolutions were massive. During the agriculture revolution, you saw a lot of people through organized farming be put out of work. You saw through, the steam engine and, a lot of the technological advances that one person was, replaced by a robot, and then you only needed one person to oversee 50 machines. Then you saw in the internet era the way that massive people were put out of work through the internet. And now we have artificial intelligence. And so instead of shying away from that and guaranteeing a human role in every element of government and then the private sector, we should start thinking, what is the highest and best use of our years on planet Earth? And is it working in a factory? Is it, stocking shelves? Because AI is not only going to replace factory workers and, delivery drivers, it's going to replace lawyers. It's going to replace marketing people, video creators. It's going to replace, did I say lawyers, doctors,
Doctor.
and so what you're going to have is you're going to have a lot of teachers that are going to get laid off, and then you're going to have them overseeing artificial intelligence, right? You're going to see a lot of doctors or administrative staff being laid off because you no longer have the human error element in surgery, and you don't have to worry about a machine taking a break. And so there's just a lot of things that machines are going to be able to do better than humans are going to be able to do. And a lot of people are going to lose their jobs because of it. And wouldn't it be better if those people became owners of the fourth largest economy in the world and were incentivized by growing our overall GDP instead of becoming destructive members of society? Because that's what will end up happening ultimately. Now, if Californians just stop paying federal income taxes, because we pay so much money in federal income taxes, we can afford to give every man, woman, and child $501 a month or $6,012 a year, which is a massive amount of money. So you look at the amount of money that's being spent in our government federally. We spend $344 billion annually on our federal government, $234 billion annually on our state government in the budget. And so if a lot of those redundancies were eliminated, I would like to see what has happened, what almost happened with Doge, which is you cut so much spending, now you're sending checks out to people. But instead of doing that on a national level where they were getting ready to send out checks to people, even though the national debt was not eliminated. State budgets have to be balanced every October. And so what you could do is you could incentivize people by having an ownership in the fourth largest economy in the world, where you have a dividend check paid out monthly based on the previous quarter's gross domestic product. So if that gross domestic product doesn't grow, the dividend doesn't grow. If we overspend on the homeless industrial complex, the nonprofit industrial complex, the administrative and bureaucratic industrial complex, if we overspend in government spending, your dividend check goes down. And so we're incentivized in voting for people who understand that government, if we treat it like a business, can not only operate in the red, but can get to a green, and then can eliminate so much waste and invest in so many things that yield a dividend, that now artificial intelligence has reduced the amount of hours and work and stress that we're putting on our bodies, on our minds, and on one another, and can actually facilitate humanity. We get to decide what makes us human. And what's going to happen is in things like screenwriting or movies or cinema, is you're going to have real cinema make a return, not just what artificial intelligence can create, but what human beings can create that define what it means to be human. Not just these massive blockbusters and military industrial complex machine movies where people are just constantly fighting against Russia and fighting against the Middle East, and you're being called. I mean, we're so tired of this stuff at this point. The world has become too small. We need to start imagining what it looks like to create the kingdom of heaven here at hand here in the state of California instead of destroy our neighbors.
I look forward to that potential future.
Thank you, Gio.
David, I'd like to shift the discussion to public safety.
Please.
What do you think our public safety has turned into in the past 25 years?
Yeah. So what had happened was during the, after One Flew for a Cuckoo's Nest came out, there was, and that was about 40, 50 years ago, I think, there was sort of this thing where we were looking at mental health and reevaluating what it meant as a state, as a country. And there were a lot of terrible things that were happening in some of these institutions. But since then, we've looked at what has happened in our streets, and street medicine and street justice is not a way to deal with mental health. So you have a lot of people over medicating, and instead of bringing back institutions where people can get, free of drugs, get on the proper medication, have their mental health evaluated, and then determine whether or not there can be a wide bridge back into society. We've sort of allowed people to just focus on themselves and then let our cities get overrun by these people. And I feel bad for them. These are human beings. I graduated from high school homeless. We were living with friends when I graduated from high school. My mom ended up getting a Habitat for Humanity house. I lived in Section 8 housing for 5 years. I grew up poor. And the difficult thing is when you look at this system that I grew up in, that a lot of you grew up in, if we don't look at it and bring justice to it, then systemic injustice will perpetuate. And right now, if you don't educate, you incarcerate. We have 5% of the world's 5% of the world's population. We have 25% of the world's prison population. And most of those people are not educated. And so we need to criminalize real crime, like we saw with AB 36. 68% of the population showed up to vote for, criminalizing crime. But you also need to build a bridge back into society through mental health and through drug rehabilitation, so that people who can get back into society, get back into society. So we stop losing 100,000 people every year to fentanyl. You stop losing 22 veterans a day to their own hand, because we need to destigmatize these mental health conversations. And you can't destigmatize them if you just continue to act like it doesn't happen and continue to defund programs that are capable of helping people get back. Instead, what happens is you have $24 billion gone missing that was designed to help address the homelessness crisis. And those kind of things, when you realize that happens, and through a healthy audit, those then need to be referred to an attorney general for prosecution. And so until we do these healthy audits and then prosecute the audits for the missing money, we're never going to have a situation where we're fixing anything in the state of California. We're not going to have fresh water. We're not going to have good schools. We're not going to fix the homeless industrial complex. We're not going to have more energy. We're not going to have anything until we start being better stewards of our money. That requires a good treasurer, a good controller, and a great secretary of state. So, and a good attorney general, because they're going to have the fight in courts. As far as homelessness goes, bring back institutions, bring back massive amounts of homelessness and investments in homelessness through public land, and then that way you bring down the cost of housing, so that so many people are stressed out to a point to where they're living in their cars and living in storage units, which we're seeing so often here in the state of California.
To tack on, very thorough answer on how it can be fixed.
I'm very autistic, and I just tell you everything that I have in my brain, and it doesn't. People are like, limit it to 2 minutes, but I apologize, Gio, and I appreciate you hanging in.
No, this is an open forum, David. This is your chance to put it out there, and we appreciate it. How quickly do you think we can get it accomplished? Your plans with like mental health and helping resolve those issues with public safety?
Rapidly. I think within the first 6 months, we could have $2 gasoline. I think that we could end human trafficking within the first 4 months. And I've had meetings with groups of people that I put together, including Pastor Rudy Gonzalez of Serpa Ministries, Lori of the Slave Free Project, Pastor Dave of the Church of Glad Tidings, because we can eliminate human trafficking in the state of California in 4 months. We can get fresh water flowing. We could break ground on new cities, and we could do it immediately. But what you need, my brother, is you need a great attorney general that's willing to have these fights and back them up in court. Because if you can't win it in court, then everything's going to be held up with the blue tape, which means that a lot of the Gestapo is going to get paid off. And we can't allow all of these situations to be treated like money laundering operations if we're going to handle massive development. Otherwise, you have things like, the lottery money. The lottery money was supposed to fix the schools in the state of California. And, a bunch of people may have gotten rich, but our schools have not been fixed. You have all of the, $2 billion in arts and music funding that we voted for, but then the next year, Governor Newsom cut $2 billion from arts and music funding. You have a Senate and an Assembly that drafted healthcare bills for Californians to have healthcare, because Californians pay for 70% of all healthcare costs in the state of California are covered by we the people. And so we look at that, and it's the number one cause of bankruptcy in America. 600,000 people are put into bankruptcy every year. And these sort of systems have not just been allowed to perpetuate, they've been fostered by a system that's been stacked up to work against us, because we look at them and we say, oh, well, what we're doing is we're just privatizing these systems. But when like in 1992, when they privatized uranium and all the nuclear enrichment in America, what they did was they privatized all the uranium, which for the private sector to be handling nuclear energy is sort of crazy. But what happened was, it wasn't a pure privatization. We had massive government subsidies, the tunes of billions of dollars every year, still being pumped into the private sector. And what happened was, our last nuclear enrichment facility was shut down in 2014. And so we don't even enrich uranium here anymore. Most of our uranium is enriched in Russia. And so is that a secure thing for us? Does that help our supply chains? And so I look at the California, the reason why we don't have doctors is because we only allow so many of them to get residencies. And that's why there's so many physician's assistants, because we limited the amount of doctors. That's why your doctor runs in, because they're in debt up to their eyeballs because of their student loan debt, and they only have 15 minutes to spend with you, and they're trying to spend it as quick as possible. And you can't get an appointment in the state of California with the doctor. And that's because people are coming into California, they're becoming doctors, and they're going back to their home country. We're limiting the amount of residencies in the state of California and throughout the country. And so what's happened is we've created scarcity in everything. Sort of capitalize on scarcity instead of banking on abundance. And I look at through solid investments, what has happened in the rest of the world. And I think, wow, that works. It's only our arrogance that's holding us back. Saudi Arabia is the 29th largest economy in the world. California is the 4th largest economy in the world. And yet Saudi Arabia leads the world in desalination, and they desalinate 6 times more water than the Colorado River produces daily. That's massive innovation. And yet our government doesn't do anything. We've let them off the hook about everything. And it's not because we, the people, haven't voted for them to do these things. It's because we voted for them, we subsidized them, we bailed them out, we continue to vote for them and send them back, even though they haven't delivered on what they said that they were going to do, instead of running a healthy audit and then having the attorney general prosecute the findings so that some of these people end up serving some time in jail, serving some time in prison. Because if you or I were not able to account for billions of dollars, we would go to jail. We'd go to prison for years. We would not see the light of day for years. And yet there's a double standard when it comes to public funds, our money, the people's money going missing. That's a shame.
Well, that's a good segue into the next question because it's about missing funds. So,
love it.
With the rising DMV fees, gas prices, money spent on the high-speed rail, and our infrastructure and roads crumbling before our eyes, where is our money going?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, the high-speed rail, look at who that contract was awarded to, right? And so we were supposed to have 24 stations that were built along that high-speed rail project. How many of those stations have been built? And yet we've already spent more than the initial projection that it was going to cost to get the whole thing done. You look at refilling the Salton Sea. It was supposed to take $1 billion to refill the Salton Sea. How many billions of dollars have we now spent on the Salton Sea? We can't even get simple things done, like we voted to get rid of daylight savings time in the state of California, yet we're all still setting our clocks back. So they can't do anything, and we, the people, have to deal with it. And so the thing is government will never be held accountable unless we hold them accountable. And we say things like, oh, you know what? We need term limits, because we, the people, understand that you can't have somebody serving in government for 20, 30, 40 years and then, go in with a net worth of, a pack of bubble gum, and now they're worth $100 million with massive corruption. And we see massive corruption on county levels, on state levels. And look how much money these people are getting paid compared to the average salary of people in their district. It's absolutely wild. And so the thing is we need to audit these funds. I would love to see Jack Guerrero do that as the controller. And in fact, we could start doing that now. A year out from Election Day, we can start auditing spending in all of these major cities. Who's getting their contracts for services? We can audit their trash pickups. We can audit where their money is being spent for their election systems. Where the money is being spent in the schools. Look at the amount of revenue that is going into these local governments, and compared to what you're getting for the amount of money that's being spent. And my gosh, I can't imagine a conservative influencer, a podcaster, a radio show host that wouldn't be interested in the findings. And what I've been trying to talk to people about is there's a gal named Christine Bish in Northern California, who I think would be a great Secretary of State, because she's a records person. And in fact, she's opened up the case to go after Adam Schiff. She opened up the case to go after Letitia James. And she's a paperwork person. She's a conservative, and she is a spitfire. And so I look at what she could do with public records acts, by pulling public records acts, finding out where the money is going, and then pass that information to Jack Guerrero, so then he could go through it line item, finding out where the money is, right? Mm-hmm. And then you pass it to your attorney general candidate, who I've talked to 5 different attorneys, and we'll talk about this in a minute. It's very difficult to get somebody to run for attorney general. I'll tell you why here in a moment. But then you hand that to the attorney general and you say, let's prosecute. Let's serve these people now. And so if we throughout the course of 12 months, got the Republican Party activated in what the Republican Party should be activated in, which is attacking the Democratic Party for their failures throughout the state of California, and then not just complaining, but offering solutions, then we could become the alternative party in the state of California. But until then, we are going to be the participation trophy party. We're going to be the party of principled losers that can't get out of their own way, the party of loser candidates and loser local establishments that have no ability to, support their local candidates. And we, the people, are tired of the failures in leadership from the state level all the way down to the county level. We're tired of the gatekeeping. We're tired of the lack of responsibility throughout the state of California, because it's not just the Democrats who have failed us throughout the state of California. It's you weak Republicans who have offered no viable alternative platforms. You've stood for nothing when you've had an opportunity to open your mouth. You haven't nailed the Democrats on what they've been failing on, and you haven't been introducing legislation to make them vote against the people in their districts. And until you failures in the Republican Party start stepping up and doing the things that you should be doing, you should be careful, because every single one of you can be replaced too.
Wow. No, that's I like that energy.
I'm a freaking combat veteran. I grew up poor. You know what I mean? Like I put on the suit because we got to put on the suit. You got to dress up nicely, right? You got to look. All the world's a stage, but I am not one of them. I'm not one of these snakes. I'm ready to drain the whole swamp and to do what Trump did in 2016, which is Trump not just took on the Democrats, he took on the Republican Party establishment. He saw how weak it was on a national level, and he went after it. And that's what we might need to do here in California, is we might have to take on the establishment. So then that way we could actually get strong players in the game so that we can actually start winning some games. That's been the biggest problem. I tell people there are 3 ways that we as Californians are going to win in this upcoming election. We need the right players in the game, right? Treasurer, controller, we've been talking about this. Assembly, Senate, all the way down the ballot. We need players in the game so we can start winning games, right? And it's Oakland A's money ball until it's LA showtime. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And then second is we have to give them something to stand on, like what Newt Gingrich did. Here's a contract with California. This is what we're standing 10 toes down on. This is what we mean business about. And if you don't mean business, get off the freaking field and free it up so that somebody else can get on the field, right? And then the third thing is we as Republicans need to understand that war without politics, politics is war without bloodshed. And war is politics with bloodshed. We need to wage politics on the state of California. We need to get organized like the Marine Corps, like the Army, on the regimental, battalion, company, squad, individual level. So then that way we can support these excellent candidates, because we got a year, baby. We got a year to shake things up and get to work and take on this ugly system and get some candidates in the game. And we're going to need everybody at the table to do it. Because if you watch this podcast and then you tune out and you don't get involved, then we lose. It's going to take every single one of us to get involved to flip the state of California. It's not going to take Scott Pressler to come in and save us. It's not going to be Steve Bannon to come and save us. Mm-hmm. It's not even going to be President Trump himself to come in and save us. We, the people, have to get involved. And if you don't get involved, we've already lost.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you 100%. And that's, going back to what we're doing, how we're trying to also work with other people, right?
Sure.
We're working with Daniel here, working with Karina and RNHA, and we're just a group of citizens, residents here of California that have had enough. It feels like kind of Danny alluded it to the question he asked you about the GOP is, we feel like we're being ignored.
Yep.
And second, it doesn't even feel like they're trying. I looked up a stat, and I think they lose 75 to 80% of the races that they endorse. Mm-hmm. So, we got to get tired of that.
They're the loser party. And here's the thing. Trump flipped 10 counties in the state of California. Every single one of those were majority Hispanic counties. We picked up a majority amongst Hispanic men. We picked up a majority amongst Black men. We picked up 7% amongst the youth. These are things that we can build on if we're willing to stand for something. And I think that we can absolutely do it. And it's going to take a bunch of pissed off dads and a bunch of pissed off moms who don't have any special qualifications, who don't have any fancy degrees, to just sort of get involved because we understand the Constitution. We've read our California state constitution. We love our country, and we don't want to leave a worse California for our children than the state that we inherited. That's as simple as that. If we're leaving a worse state for our children than the one that we inherited, then just like you say in your intro, we need to stop giving up. California is worth saving. This is a beautiful state. We used to lead the world in everything. I love my state. Even though I grew up poor, even though I graduated from high school homeless, I always felt like I could do anything that I wanted to do in the state of California, that I could be anything that I wanted to be in the state of California. And I don't feel like our children have those same sort of dreams entering into the workforce, graduating from high school. I feel like they're seeing a future that's been stacked up against them. And it's going to take the millennials to get to work, to get to bat, to lay down cover fire so that Gen Z can move. Because if we don't get organized, my brother, then I feel like there's not going to be an opportunity for Gen Z to get organized in the future if we don't give them something to stand up for, somebody that stands up for them. And we've just been sold out. We've been completely sold out.
Yeah. No, I agree. Go ahead.
Yeah, talk to me, Danny.
You're bringing in the way that you're delivering the message. I can tell you that that's one of the reasons that we started doing what we're doing is because of people like you.
Appreciate that.
With the type of passion, the genuineness that you bring to the message that you're delivering. If you continue to do that, you're inspiring other people to do exactly what you're calling them to do, is to stand up and do something about it. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Brother, that means a lot to me. I appreciate that. The thing is we're torchbearers for the people that can't carry their torch anymore. You know what I mean? Both of my grandparents served in Korea. I lost a close friend of mine in combat in Afghanistan, carried him home, and, his light may not be here anymore, but I'm carrying it for him. And so we have a responsibility to those, our ancestors, the people that came before us, that made this country what it is. We have a responsibility to do our part. And so, yeah, brother, it drives me a little bit crazy. I'm not a rich candidate. I don't have a ton of money. I drove into this because I want to be a public servant. And I'm going to let you in on the backside. I love my family, but my family is also suffering because I'm jumping in on this. And I'm going to just peel back the curtain. My oven doesn't work. My microwave doesn't work. My dishwasher doesn't work. My AC unit blew out. And so I've spent so much time and energy and money on this campaign that, parts of my life are falling apart. But, I'm sacrificing it. I'm putting it all on the table because I know that if I don't put it all on the table now, that table might not exist for our kids. What would it mean if I were to leave my children $1 million and a home in a broken state, in a broken country that no longer serves the people? And so I look at this as a once in a generation fight, that it's on us to stand 10 toes down for those who came before us, those who rushed the beaches on D-Day and never came back. Those who, lost their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan, the people that built this country, our forefathers that came here. If we're not willing to carry that torch for them, it says a lot about who we are. You know what I mean? And so I appreciate the acknowledgement for the passion. I go up to 11 for those of you that have seen Spinal Tap, and I just stay there. There's no off mode for me. I'm just constantly passionately involved in politics because I can see what's going on. I want to get people educated in the process, but I also want to get people engaged because we need fighters, brother. We need people to come in and run for assembly, run for Senate, school board, county supervisor, run for Congress, to run against incumbents and to shake this system up from the ground up, because we're either getting ready to have one of three type of revolutions. And I tell billionaires this too. I tell them, you should be incredibly grateful that I'm here talking to you right now, because I'm giving you an opportunity to invest in something while there's still something to invest in, something more than speculation, something real, right? And because we're either getting ready to have one of three revolutions: an American revolution, That's going to be war in the streets, right? A French Revolution, that's going to be a war led by guillotines in the courts, or we're going to have a revolution of ideas. And I feel like if we can have a revolution of ideas, then we can save our country and save our state from violence. Because what drives me crazy, and I'm sorry to go off on so many tangents, is when I talk to people about getting engaged in the process and they say, oh, brother, we're past voting. And I think, please don't say that.
Hmm.
Because if we're past voting, if your vote does not count, then that means violence. And I'm not willing to accept that as an outcome for this country. I'm willing to die for it, but I don't want our children to have to die for it. Like I want to live for it. I'd rather live. Wouldn't that be better?
Yeah, no, that's true. And you said, would you say you were at 11?
Out of 11.
Okay. We got a viewer question, and we'll see. Maybe you
Please.
might get to 12 or 15 on this one.
Okay.
So one of the viewers asked, "How do you plan on stopping the grooming of our children? And will you make it a law that pedophilia will be punished by life sentences or even death sentences?"
So yeah, sure. So like I said, I've been engaged in a ministry since 2018 called CERT Ministries, Search, Evangelize, Rescue, Train. It's led by Pastor Rudy. I'm not an operator. I don't firsthand disrupt human trafficking, but I have been on a ride along before where that happened. These people are absolutely radical. Some of my best friends, they do armed training every Monday. The thing is we have become soft on the wrong kinds of crime. Like, why is pedophilia not punished to the extremes? Why are these child molesters not punished to the extremes? And if they're let out, they should have hazard stripes painted in front of their house so that our children know which areas to avoid. We have to become overt about this kind of stuff. Now, it doesn't the drug dealers don't really bother me. The drug users don't really bother me. I'm pretty libertarian in a lot of different ways, but if we're not protecting our children, what the hell are we doing? Right? We protect the president of the United States with guns. We protect the governor with guns. We protect our children with gun-free zone stickers. I mean, what in the world? Of course, people aren't going to respect that kind of stuff. So we need to be harsh on the real kinds of crime. That includes, doing something that the people voted for, which is the death penalty. If you have been sentenced to the death penalty in the state of California, it's because you have done something heinous and you have been accused beyond a reasonable doubt and convicted to death. And so if we're not willing to prosecute crime the way that it is on the books, then people are going to continue to start playing games with the definitions of crime and what it actually means. Things like, lesser sentences if the child was only 16 or if the child was 14. There should be no games played whatsoever. If you are molesting, fiddling, fondling, harassing anyone under the ages of 18, you should have the book thrown at you. And why are we chemically castrating students, minors, but not sexual predators? And so I look at this kind of stuff, and I don't want the possibility for these people to reoffend in any way whatsoever. And we've done this through the courts. We've done this through the assembly, through the Senate. The fact that we don't prosecute the purchasers of prostitution as heavily as those who are being prostituted, and it's happening out in the open. So it's not just children that are being subjected to this kind of stuff, it's adults too. And it's happening in the open. And you probably know in your hometown what streets it's happening on. But in LA, in the city of Orange, human beings are being bought and sold like product in the middle of the day where our children are going to schools. And so we have to go after this sort of drug trafficking and human trafficking, and also go after those who would seek to harm our children through the fullest extent of the law. And I think that everybody would be on board with that.
Mm-hmm.
Serpa, I served. I was with you for about a year and a half in your congressional campaign race, and you were one of the most inspiring figures that I had in my adult life. And I've seen that you're always you're a Marine. Your words were like a machine gun.
Hmm.
And people noticed that, and people took account for that. And you inspired, and I see many young men in colleges, at churches. We went to St. Andrew's Orthodox Church, and I saw the young men hearing you speak and respect the things you got to say. You inspire a lot of the young men in that church. So I do want to give you credit for that. I learned a whole lot about you. I learned how to manage a team with you, and I saw true political leadership under you. So with that, I do want to appreciate you and everything you've done. And your
I
heart was
appreciate
always in
that.
a good place. Your heart was always in a good place. So I do want to thank you, David.
I think
And then,
someone's tapping right now, and it's picking up on the microphone. But the we had a lot of young people, didn't we, Daniel? We had
yes,
a lot of young men specifically that were very engaged in our campaign, that were out knocking doors and phone banking, and these young people that had never been involved in politics before. Um, I gave them some hope. I gave them a plan. I gave them an agenda. You know what I mean? And the thing is if you can get organized and have a little bit of discipline and get some marching orders, which is why I tell people, hey, listen, if we're going to win the state of California, it's going to take the Republican regiment. It's going to take a group of people organized on a regiment, battalion, company, squad, individual level, because we already did that during the congressional campaign. We took a D+27 district where the Republican Party sent me out in the desert to die. Not only did they not support me in going out to a district that I didn't live in to run against a candidate that they wanted me to run against, but when I was the only Republican in the race, they decided not to endorse me. And so it's these sort of stupid games that these local central committees play, that the state party plays, where we're picking winners and losers. It's almost like we would rather have a Democrat win than have a Republican win that we don't have our strings on. And so I think that that's something that people realized while working on my campaign, that there's no strings on me, that I'm going to say whatever pops into my mind because I feel like saying it and because it's the right thing to say. And at the end of the day, your job as a machine gunner in the Marine Corps is to open up fire so that other people can move. The saying is, movement without suppression is suicide. And so I want to be able to apply that suppression verbally with my words. Like you said, my words are like a machine gun, so that other people feel comfortable speaking up for what they believe in, and they feel comfortable getting engaged in the democratic process. And some of those people are now running for office. Some of those people ran for office in the last election cycle. The whole thing is to get more people involved in the game, right? I know that one man cannot save us. First off, that's coming from higher. You know what I mean? One man can't save us. Are you freaking out of your mind? But at the end of the day, a bunch of us working together can absolutely do what we need to do on a state level. And we have 1 year to do it. That's a lot of time for the wrong candidate to be out in front. And I'm just going to tell you, Steve Hilton, who's probably out in front right now, he's been an American for 5 years? He moved to California 2 years ago. I have a 6-year-old who's been a 5-year-old who's been an American for longer than Steve Hilton has been an American. In addition to that, it's not like he was even in the UK, in England, working for a wonderful prime minister. He was working for one of the worst prime ministers in the history of the United Kingdom, which is David Cameron, who oversaw the Brexit vote, a complete breakdown in leadership. And then when Brexit was passed, David Cameron took his little ball and went home because he is an elitist. He is part of the political oligarchy that has always overseen and led us, the neocons that led us into the Iraq and Afghanistan war. And so I'm not impressed with David Cameron. I'm not impressed with the UK. And in fact, Steve Hilton, who came to California freaking 2 years ago and now lives in the richest zip code in the state of California and is worth $75 million, and he's married to a CEO of Google and of Netflix. Brother, you are the media establishment pick. I saw where you were educated. He's got it right there on his website. He was educated at Christ Hospital. So for those of you that look into Christ Hospital, it is an Ivy League fancy school where he went to his elementary, middle, and high school. It looks like Hogwarts. It's so fancy, it looks like Hogwarts. He needs to go back across the pond, back to Hogwarts, back to Oxford University, and help the United Kingdom un-F themselves. We can do it here in the state of California. I've been here for 40 years. I've lived in 14 of these counties throughout the state of California, in the far north, in the Central Valley, in the Bay Area, in the Sierra Nevadas, in LA and San Diego County, in Orange County. He's been here for 5 minutes. And he thinks because he goes down with a film crew in the middle of the day to Skid Row that all of a sudden that qualifies him to be the leader. So at the end of the day, the media can pick Steve Hilton all they want. But we, the people, are the ones that are going to pick our leader. And a lot of these media losers that have endorsed Steve Hilton, you're a part of the swamp. You endorsed him a year before the election day. You've anointed him. Well, I can tell you right now, in California, we don't have kings. We don't have queens. We don't have princes and lords. And if this short, bald British dude comes in and wins here in California, I'm throwing something into a harbor. I'm throwing some tea into a harbor. I'm going to get upset about something because we in California, we don't need it. The British accent isn't going to play here, homeboy. And so I wish him the best. I wish the little governor all the best. He could head on back to Hogwarts, though, because we in California aren't going to do it. I wish the other people in the race the best. At least they're Californians and they've been here for a freaking minute. But we don't need Hogwarts coming over here from the United Kingdom and telling us, what we need to do. We need some real leadership. We need some real bomb throwers. I don't want a nice boy. I don't want a sweetheart in Sacramento. I don't want the sweetest kid at summer camp to go leading the way in Sacramento. We need somebody who's going to come in with a little bit of tenacity, a little bit of fire and brimstone, a little bit of chutzpah, in order to, change the state of California the way that it needs to be changed.
And I got two things, so us Californians could solve a California problem, correct? That the Democrats have created. So
correct. Yeah, no, and we have to show how we can solve it. Because what's happened is time and time again, the Republican losers have put out candidates that have been absolutely pathetic in the state level, when it comes time to debate. I mean, Dolly, Brian Dolly, he went up and he debated Governor Newsom, and Governor Newsom made him look like his redheaded stepson standing there next to him. He looked like a child. And so when you have an opportunity to speak, where you get to stand up in front of people, you better have some solutions, right? Larry Elder, I like Larry Elder. Larry Elder's a great guy. I've listened to him for years on the radio. But they would ask him, what's the number one problem in the state of California? And he would talk about fatherless households. Okay, great. But you're not running for head pastor, right? You're running for governor of the fourth largest economy in the world. What can you do to help us fix this economy? And so I'm just disappointed with the lack of leadership. A lot of the nerds a lot of the dorks that we have in the Senate and the Assembly as Republicans. I love nerds. I love people that can dive into the data, dive into history, articulate themselves, bring a better message forward. But unfortunately, we got a lot of dorks in the Republican Party that the only thing that they're good at is reporting about how they're getting their butts kicked in Sacramento, and I can't do anything about it because I'm outnumbered. Roll up your sleeves and get to work, or we will replace you.
I fully agree with you on that. I'm going to give you two facts regarding
Talk to me.
Points here. Are you aware that the median age of USA home buyers is now 56 years old in 2024, up from 31 years old in 1981? So that's one fact. The second fact is this. Are you also aware that the state of California approved State Farm's 17% rate increase in homeowners insurance rate and 15% increase of renters insurance rate? And a lot of insurance companies have left California altogether.
So, you're absolutely right. And what you've seen through, especially since COVID, is you haven't seen a rapid valuation of your homes where your home has increased in value. What you've seen is a rapid devaluation of your dollar. And that's really hard for people to understand. I bought my first home while I was a Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps, an E3. And this was, in 2011, I think, 14 years ago. I bought it for $235,000 and a pack of bubble gum. I'm just kidding. $235,000. And then a few years later, that same house is worth, 385,000, when I went through a divorce and I needed to buy a house down the street. And then a few years after that, this same house is worth $750,000. It did not go from being worth 250,000 to being worth 750,000, as in I got $500,000 in equity. What happened is my dollar is worth a third of what it was just a few years ago, right? Before COVID-19. Your dollar has a third of the purchasing power. So instead of being able to buy a house for 250,000 in my community, you're buying a house for 750,000. And you can see that because the cost of oil has tripled, the cost of energy has tripled, the cost of your groceries has tripled, the cost of education has skyrocketed. And so when you look at all of that, it was done because the rapid devaluation of our dollar. And so, yes, we need to have insurance in the state of California. Part of the job of the insurance commissioner is to make the state of California someplace where insurance wants to do business, because about 7 to 10% of any economy is somebody who's working in insurance. That's a significant part of an economy. And we've made things so predatory for home insurance here in the state of California that people can't even buy home insurance in the state of California. And so what I want to do is I want to work with the state treasurer. And I've talked to one person about being state treasurer, which was Anthony Glenn II. I'm also getting ready to talk to another person here, hopefully tomorrow, whose name's Derek Evans. And he works, he's a lender, and he runs a show called Smarter San Diego. He's a money guy. We need a money guy to be in charge of our treasury. And one of the things that we could do is we could incentivize people in the same way that we incentivize them to buy homes in the state of California with the FHA loan, with the VA loan, with conventional loans, is we could develop more agriculture products. So we are incentivizing people and loaning to people through partnering with the federal government for them to buy farms, which originally was the idea of the USDA loan. Because in California, we're an agriculture state. But we need to bring back our small to medium-sized agriculture and not just our big ag, which is working on a massive monopolization by drying everybody out of business. So I want to strengthen home ownership by building massive amounts of new inventory, not high-density housing, not projects, not slums, but 1,200 to 1,800 square foot starter homes. Because developers, 25% of their development fees in single family residences go to the real estate Gestapo and, in money and fees. 40% of all commercial development goes to fees. And so what's happened is developers just have decided that they no longer want to develop in the state of California at all. And so when you create a situation where we're no longer developing, of course, costs are going to go up astronomically. Instead, let's free up those 300,000 acres of public land out of 48 million to build 5 new cities, to add 1.5 million new single family homes to existing cities, because we need about 2.5 million homes to bring us current in the state of California. And if we flood the market with new homes, what's going to happen is the cost of housing is actually going to go down because we've introduced more products. So people will say, oh, well, then my house is no longer going to be worth 750,000. It's going to be worth 500,000. Yes, that's true. But now your children might be able to afford to buy a home in the neighborhood that they grew up in, instead of being forced to go buy a house in West Virginia in order to ever be able to purchase and participate in the American dream. So there's a massive amount of development that needs to happen here in the state of California in order to make homeownership affordable. But that not only needs to happen through the treasurer, through the controller, through the secretary of state, and through the lieutenant governor sort of working together, and the insurance commissioner making it so that insurance wants to do business in the state of California. But we also need to partner with the federal government and cooperate with the federal government. Otherwise, the EPA is going to be a nightmare. And President Trump and our Senate and our Congress have already voted to sell some public land for development. That's already part of the Trump platform, is the development of public lands. And what's happening is you've got a lot of people who are kind of, a little bit slower, or, maybe they don't function properly, but they say, oh, we shouldn't be developing so much public land. It's like during the real estate boom that made boomers the largest owners of homes in American history, what do you think we were developing? It was public land. We had massive government programs, but we also had massive oversight in antitrust laws. We had large tax rates on the top 0.0001%. Because what you have in the state, you have in America is you have three people, and Bernie Sanders and AOC bring this up, and they're not wrong. You have three people who control more wealth than 157 million people in the state of California. That's royalty type stuff. That's guillotine type stuff. That's the kind of stuff that revolutions are fought over. And so when America was at its greatest, financially and economically, it was because, trickle down economics actually still existed. Now it's become a hoarding game where, not only are people interested in seeing the first billionaire, they want to see the first trillionaire. And I'm like, do you know what that would do to the American economy to have a trillionaire? During COVID, the lower and middle class lost $1 billion in value every single day as a new billionaire was created every single day. And so the Republican Party is the party of the middle class and the working class. We're the party of business owners. We're not the party of Davos and billionaires. Overwhelmingly, billionaires donated to Kamala Harris, not President Trump. People need to remember that Elon Musk was the anomaly when it came to donations from billionaires. All of the other billionaires went for the Democrats. They're the party of the oligarchy, of the super wealthy, of the elites. I call them elites because they're not elite in anything. They're not better than us. They're parasites. And so the parasite class find themselves heavily invested in the Democratic Party because that's always been the party of the oligarchy. That's not the party of us, the working class, the people. And, now you have not just a working class, you have a working poor in the state of California. You have people that work 2 full-time jobs and they side hustle for Uber or for Lyft, and they still can't afford their rent. And so, somebody's got to come along to represent the average everyday people in the state of California. And unless we, the Republican Party, realize that we are the party of the people, we are the party of populism, where a person that agrees with us 80% of the time is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor, we're never going to build that massive economic nationalist movement in the state of California that we need to build in order for Californians to be successful, not just California. Everyone's like, I'm afraid to ask him another question because 25-minute answers.
As always, Serpa, you answered everything I just said beautifully. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Shift the discussion to a topic that is pretty hot now, nationwide, but especially here in California, and that's on voting. What is your position on voter ID? As governor, how would you improve or restore faith in the system by which California chooses its representatives?
Sure. So a lot of these things, there's somebody who's in charge of that, right? So do we know who's in charge of this in the state of California? I won't put you on the spot, but it's the Secretary of State. Ooh, somebody said it. Who said it? All right, Daniel. Well done. You're absolutely right. The Secretary of State is in charge of elections, and they're not just in charge of elections. They're in charge of 6 different departments in the state of California. One of those is the executive branch. They're in charge of records. They're in charge of the political reform policy. They're in charge of elections, and they're in charge of the business and management of the state of California. And so with the elections, we need a great Secretary of State. Somebody like Chris Bish would be fantastic. Christine Bish would be an amazing Secretary of State, but she's got to decide to throw her hat in the ring. Same day voting, voter ID. You make election day a holiday, so then that way everybody has access. And there's certain things that you should have an ID for. If you've ever bought a house, you have to prove who you are. A notary public comes out, they take out your ID, they check it, they sign off saying who you are. It should be the same process for voting. It should be the same process if you get a job in the state of California through programs like E-Verify. Prove you're a resident. It should be the same thing if you want to get housing in the state of California. Prove that you're a resident. These are the kind of things that bring back the middle class You should not have people participating in your elections that are not residents. You should not have people participating in your economy that are not residents. That's a shadow economy. That's a way for wealth and resources to be siphoned out of your country and out of your communities because that money goes to another state. And a lot of times, of course, that's Mexico. So you look at the shadow economy that needs to be eliminated by people having ID so that they can get a job. And if they can't get a job, a lot of people are going to self-deport. In addition to that, you should have an ID so that you can buy a house, so that you can rent a house, because people should not be able to participate in the housing industry if they're not a resident. If they're not able to, then a lot of people will self-deport and the cost of housing will go down. And so all of these things are connected. Finally, not only do we need to fix it with same-day voting and voter ID, but did you know that in the state of California, as one of your 3 words that you use as your ballot designations to describe yourself, you cannot use the word veteran if you served in the armed forces. I can't, if you're a teacher, you could call yourself a teacher. If you're, a stripper, you could call yourself a stripper. If you're a veteran, you can't call yourself a veteran on the ballot in the state of California. And so, I had this fight with the Secretary of State, and they said, well, that's not something that you currently are. It refers to a past status. I said, well, then I want to identify as a Marine on the ballot, because once a Marine, always a Marine. Can you tell me that I'm not a Marine? And they wouldn't allow me to identify as a Marine either. And so the state of California, if all we did was in the Secretary of State's office was make same-day voting, voter ID, and plus allow veterans to identify as veterans with their ballot designation, in the state that has 1.8 million veterans, more than any other state in the country, I think more veterans would step into leadership and have an easier time getting elected. But we Californians, we honor veterans. We love veterans. We understand that they took an oath of enlistment that said, up to my beating heart, I'm willing to protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I went to the other side of the world. I didn't find a lot of enemies of the Constitution there. I think there's a lot in Sacramento and a lot in Washington, D.C. And so if you want to clean up the elections, not only do you have to clean up election day, you also have to clean up the process beforehand, because we have a lot of gatekeepers involved in the democratic process, not only in the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party as well. I don't know if you know this, but this guy, David Hogg, I don't know how you say his last name. He was nominated as either the chair of the DNC or the vice chair of the DNC. And he said that they're going to need to start running primaries against people in deeply blue districts that have been in for a long time. Well, they dropped him like a freaking hot pocket real quick, because the system hates to be contested from within. Because like I said earlier, I don't care who you vote for governor, just as long as I get to pick both of your nominees, right? So if they control the nominee process, the nomination process, they control and gatekeep who gets to the public, then what you have is you have a bunch of gatekeepers. They can decide who the top of the Republican Party is and who the top of the Democratic Party is, as long as we, the people, do not get involved and activate the people around us.
Silva's got something that he wants to share with us. It's breaking.
Hit it.
Serpa, breaking news. Are you ready for the bombshell? If
I
that
hope
or
so.
the nuke bomb, and I cannot wait for your machine gun fire afterwards. That's a big
gonna be
hit.
good.
It just got a release. It's official. Kamala Harris is running for California governor. It's official now. It's
Wow.
breaking.
No.
Please,
Well,
I know you attacked Hilton and you said amazing words. I love it. Please give us your 2 cents and beautiful words.
Yeah, Kamala Harris couldn't win a potato sack race. She's she could do whatever she wants to do. The thing is she is the best hope of the Democratic Party right now for winning, because she's got the best name recognition. But I've been saying this from the beginning. The same way that the Republican Party has a problem with MAGA is the way that the Democratic Party has a problem with progressives. And now you have Katie Porter, who is sort of the moderate Democrat, the populist Democrat that is running. And she's got a lot of, she raised a lot of money on $15 to $20 donations. I've been saying from the beginning, the Democratic Party will not allow Katie Porter to hold the nomination. They'll do anything that they can to get Kamala Harris in, because Kamala Harris is an establishment stooge. Kamala Harris is she's never really ran for anything that she's won. The people do not like her. They do not show up to vote for her. They outspent Trump 4-1, and they couldn't get her elected. They couldn't push her over the finish line. And so the thing is she's deeply unlikable, and deeply undesirable, but she is the biggest name out there for the Democratic Party, which is why the Democrats launched her instead of Katie Porter, because they can't control Katie Porter. At the end of the day, Katie Porter doesn't have strings on her. She's the largest, small dollar donor in the Democratic Party. I knew that they would not allow her to do it. They were going to do everything they can to bring in a nominee that they could control. And that nominee is Kamala Harris. And so, she was an attorney general, which the attorney general, for those of you that don't know, they're responsible for the protection of Californians, the safety and well-being of Californians, to protect our constitutional rights. And she's the person that laughed about locking up people for marijuana use, that withheld, information that would have, not just information, that withheld evidence that would have seen an innocent man exonerated, but instead he was kept in federal prison, in state prison for longer than he needed to, because she's a big private prison nut. She's the big top cop in the state of California. She's all about that slave labor. She loves it. And so Kamala Harris is the top cop in the state of California. She's a bad cop in the state of California. She's a corrupt cop, but she is the establishment stooge. Katie Porter would not play that role because she's too principled at the end of the day for the Republicans or for the Democrats. She's too principled because she stands for something. She'll bring out the whiteboard and actually break it down for everybody. Can you imagine Kamala Harris bringing out a whiteboard to explain anything to anybody? It's not going to happen. So they had their chance with Katie Porter, really a principled person. In fact, I bought Katie Porter's book. Here it is. Katie Porter's book. Could you imagine Kamala Harris writing a book? I don't know if Kamala Harris could write a book or if she could write a paragraph even, but Katie Porter wrote a book. I don't think Kamala Harris could write an essay. I don't think she could
read it.
She couldn't read it. And so, Katie Porter strung together some things that she stood for. And this is her book. This is how thick it is. I wrote my own book called Common Sense for California, and it was so thick that I had to separate it into 2 books. So there's 2 volumes of where I stand in the state of California. How long has Kamala Harris been a leader? And she has not ever even finished a website. Finally, you've got Governor Newsom. I've got his book back here. Where is it? It's around here somewhere. His book is called Citizenville. It might be next to my bed right now because I'm reading it currently. But I wanted to get caught back up on Governor Newsom. So Governor Newsom wrote a book. Katie Porter wrote a book. Yours truly, David Serpa. I've written 5 books. Kamala Harris couldn't even finish where she stands on her own website. She kept pulling information off of other websites. So she doesn't stand for anything. She's an empty head. She's an empty skirt. I've never really been impressed by her. And I don't think that the people here in California are going to be impressed either. They're going to see right through us. In fact, see right through her. It's going to give us an opportunity to have our Jimmy Carter moment, which is what I've been telling people. We have an opportunity to swing this state red because you look through the history books, and not only did Texas flip red in one election cycle, like we talked about in 1994, but we have an opportunity here in the state of California to absolutely nail these Democrats like Ronald Reagan did to Jimmy Carter. Make them sit in their dirty diaper. Make them sit in their messy bed. Kamala Harris, who was appointed, attorney general for Governor Newsom, and long-term involved in the state of San Francisco's politics, has overseen the failure of the state of California, and now we get to hold her accountable for that. It's a dream. I love it. Fantastic.
David, we here on Latino Free Minds, we're just a few Latino men that live throughout the state of California. Personally, I've lived in Sacramento. I've lived in Fresno County. and I've lived in Los Angeles County. So I've been all over, kind of like you. Um, you know, as Latinos, we're proud that a large part of our audience is Latino. We're also proud that we come on here as free thinkers. And as free thinkers, we like to get the message out to our Latino audience. So I have a question in regards to Latino outreach. Latinos represent roughly 39% of the California population. What sort of outreach is your campaign doing to reach out to a group that is nearly the majority in the state?
Sure. So just a couple of days ago, I was on the LA HRC radio show out in Glendale. And so you could find that. It was streamed live, just like we're doing here right now. So the Hispanic Republican Coalition, I was on with them. I'm on here with you guys tonight. The thing is, in the state of California, is of course a lot depends on your last name. And people look at me and they know that I'm Serpa and I've got I'm Portuguese and whatnot. I'm Portuguese and Irish, and they know that they've got somebody in me that my name reads into it. The state of California, you know what I mean? That's what we stand on. That's who we are, and we've all got these diverse backgrounds. And so specifically, what am I doing? Well, there's this great slogan at LAHRC: "Brown is the new red." And, both Hispanics and the Black population are going conservative because they realized a long time ago that conservative values, are Hispanic values. And so what do I need to do specifically? I don't have to do anything specifically for the Hispanics. I don't have to do a single bit of outreach specifically for the Hispanics, because the thing is economically, these situations speak to all of us. We're all out there living paycheck to paycheck. 40% of us can't afford an unexpected bill. 80% of us are living paycheck to paycheck. We're being strangled out of housing. We don't like the way that our children are being educated. We see the way that our public university system has been sold to the highest bidder, the way that our children have been built a debt cage, the lack of good paying jobs in our communities. These are universal issues that happen to jive with the Hispanic population. Everybody speaks business. I've been out, I speak to the Vietnamese community, the Korean community, the Chinese community. Everybody speaks business. Everybody speaks economics, and everybody understands common sense. But what we need to do in our pursuit of common sense, because I believe that we as, Republicans, we're the common sense party, but we also used to be, as Republicans, the party of the compassionate conservative. Somewhere along the way, we thought that, being mean was a brand. And that's not the case. People need leadership. They need a little bit of compassion. They need a little bit of understanding. And the thing is I'm right here in it with all of you guys. I've got 5 kids going to school. 2 of them are graduating from high school next year, and they're going to be entering into the economy. The other 3, 2 of them are in elementary school, or one of them's heading into elementary school. The other one's in middle school. And so I'm in it. I'm in the economy with everybody. And so I don't have to do anything special to appeal to the Hispanic community, to the Black community, to the Chinese community, the Vietnamese community. In fact, I'm really sick of all the virtue signaling that's been happening. I look at all of this stuff and, there's sort of like, what are you going to do for the gay community? And what are you going to do for the Christian community? The same thing that I'm going to do for every freaking community. You get what I'm saying? And so, there's the Pride Month thing. A lot of people are very frustrated about Pride Month, and they're saying, oh, it should be this. Well, it's also, National Portuguese Heritage Month, and Migraine and Headache Awareness Month, and Caribbean American Heritage Month, and PTSD Awareness Month. And so, I had my political consultants in the last campaign saying, oh, hey, wish everybody a happy Festival of Lights. Make sure that you wish everybody a happy Hanukkah. Make sure that you wish everyone a happy Kwanzaa. And I never did any of that stuff because it's placating, it's condescending to sit there and look you in the eyes and be like, oh, well, this is what I'm going to do specifically for the Hispanic community. Brother, we're all struggling with the same thing. I know a lot of Hispanics that are doing very well in real estate, that are making millions of dollars. I know Hispanic, attorneys. I know Hispanic doctors, and so when you look at a lot of this stuff, what is the Hispanic community? They're a community that is deeply American, deeply Californian. They're just like every single one of us. And we have been so fractured and so divided. And that's the enemy playbook. The enemy playbook is divide and conquer, right? But what happens when we don't allow ourselves to be divided by race, to be divided by political party, to be divided by religion? Then what's going to happen is they're actually going to have to start promising us something that actually requires them to follow up and not just virtue signaling. So you'll never see me wishing everybody a happy anything day or a happy anything month, because I'm somebody that I don't dangle my leg out for everybody or anybody. I'm exactly who I am in every room. And I think that everything that you guys are struggling, I've probably already touched on throughout the course of this podcast. It's because we're all struggling with it. And it's not just Hispanics. It's not just those in the Black community. It's not just those in the gay community. We're all suffering with the same bull crap. And it's time that we unite, because when it is class consciousness, when we, and this is the reason why the university system was defunded in the state of California, despite spending the first 100 years of our education system in the state of California actually educating the public. They were very nervous about an educated proletariat. And so Ronald Reagan put the kibosh to the publicly funded university system and started shifting towards the privatization, the private funding of our education system. And it has been a mess. But the more that we become educated, the more that we become enlightened, the more that we realize that we are all in this thing together. And it's not a Latino thing. It's not a Hispanic thing, a Black thing, a gay thing, a white thing, a Christian thing, a Muslim thing, a Buddhist thing. It's a California thing. And hopefully we can all get through that together. I hope that makes sense.
No, that made a lot of sense. That's actually a pretty good answer. And we've had, I don't even know how many questions we asked you. We asked you a lot of questions, and thank you for your time. You've answered every single one of them. So to kind of wrap this up, what final message would you give to the voters that tuned into this conversation, that listened to you, and maybe heard from you for the first time? Like, what message do you have to them?
So I'll tell you what, brother. I'm going to tell you something that I've actually never shared with anyone before, which I think that might be a little bit interesting. So what had happened was, when I met my wife, she actually thought I was Mexican when she saw my signs and whatnot. And she said, I came in, I was expecting a Mexican man. And then, I found out that you didn't speak Spanish and whatnot. And she said, and I get calls all the time, people just speaking Spanish, asking me questions about real estate. And unfortunately, I've got this big fat American tongue and I'm not, working it out properly. And I've tried to learn Spanish. My wife knows Spanish, but I haven't gotten on the ball. But what happened was, in my first marriage, my wife, when she was pregnant, she wanted to name my son Cormac or Liam, something Irish. And I said, look at me. How Irish do you think this kid is going to look? I'm Hispanic, because my dad is adopted, right? I had no idea what my dad was. No idea. I just look at him and he's a construction worker, right? He's a carpenter. He's a dark dude. I assumed he's Hispanic. My mom is, half Portuguese. And so I just said, look at how dark I am. Our kids are going to look Hispanic. You think they're going to be Irish? And what happened was, my son is blonde haired and blue eyed. And I was like, he looks totally Irish. So I was never going to do one of those 23andMe things, one of the DNA things, because it just, my dad was adopted. Out of respect for him, I just left the door closed. You know what I mean? And people throughout my life are like, oh, I swear you're Mexican, or I swear you're Jewish, or I swear you're this. And they would just assign me whoever. I swear you're Armenian. And I take all those things, and I might be. I have no idea what I am. But what happened was, about 3 years ago, my dad had his DNA ran. And it turned out he's 98.5% Irish and 1.5% Scottish. So I'm way Irish. I'm like 78% Irish and like 22% Hispanic or whatnot, 22% Portuguese. And so, but my whole life, I just never knew what I was. But so I've always felt akin to everybody. And so when it comes to these things like identifying with certain groups, my whole life, I'm like, I don't know what I am. I have no idea. I might be Portuguese, or I might be Irish, or I might be Hispanic, or I might be Mexican. I have no idea what I am. Turns out I'm Portuguese and Irish. So it was kind of an interesting thing. So what can people do to follow with me? I release a show on my social media that I cut up into viral clips. You could find it on YouTube, and on my personal Facebook page, Instagram, TikTok. I'm constantly releasing a lot of clips. I'm gonna be releasing more, but the last 2 weeks I've had to real estate a little bit to try to make some money. Like I've got 5 kids. Those they're not feeding themselves yet, so I got to make that money. And but at the end of the day, I'm extraordinarily grateful that we have another year for the cream to rise to the top, for a little bit of competition, for some innovation to thrive outside of a monopoly, because Republicans love competition. We love debate. We love the spirit of letting ideas rise to the top. And so you can find my books, Common Sense for California, on Amazon. It's over 800 pages of ideas, but I have a short 6-page introduction that's called Opening Burst. That's, the sort of the main ideas, because not everyone's going to read 850 pages of political history and policy. But I have it if you want some more Serpa. And then go ahead and go to davidserpaforgovernor.com. You'll also find my cell phone number on my website. I'm one of those people that I actually do return those phone calls and return text messages. I'm relatively easy to get a hold of, because I believe if you're going to run a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, we are going to need a servant leader to get out in front, to understand that your job is to be a public servant. Part of that is to be accountable to the people. The other part of that is to be available to the people. And so I really appreciate you guys making the time for us to exchange this dialogue here today. I'm looking forward to seeing what the other candidates have to say, because there's a lot that needs to be done in the state of California. And unfortunately, far too often, people are given a microphone and they've just got nothing going on in between their ears. And so it'll be interesting to see that get exposed throughout the course of the next year. But I do think that we've got a lot of good candidates out there to choose from. I just happen to think that I'm the best one.
Yeah. That's how it should be, right? I would hope each candidate hopes they're the best one. You know what I mean?
But yeah, and at the end of the day, like I'm making fun of Steve Hilton about being British and about, I want to throw tea into the harbor if he wins and all that different stuff. Look, man, like if I could afford to read his book, I'd read his book too, but he's only selling it in hardcover for $35. And I'm like, how dare you? You better put that thing out in paperback. Californians can't afford that thing in hardcover, Steve. And so I wish Steve the best, in turning around the UK back there at Hogwarts. I really believe in him, and that, he could get the king and everybody on board and show them what a real American revolution looks like back home.
That's hilarious. All right, David. Well, again, thank you for coming on.
Appreciate it, brother.
Someone in the comments said we accept you and you are invited to the carne asada. So,
all right.
We're appreciative of your time, your answers. It means a lot to us as voters trying to get to know you. So hopefully everyone that tuned in knows David Serpa better now. So again, thank you, guys, too, for the questions you guys had. And I'm pretty sure we'll do this again.
I'll be looking forward to it, my brothers. As many times as you guys want to have me on, I appreciate the opportunity to access your audience. This is what we need to be doing. We need to start having these dialogues, having these conversations, giving people the opportunity to speak. And I've got so much respect for you guys for putting yourselves out there to do it, because I tried to encourage a debate between a local school board race and between, some local congressional candidates. And I was getting fired at from all sides saying, oh, you should support this person. And why are you encouraging a debate? It's like, it's fundamentally American to debate.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we do. So Daniel, Gio, Mr. Silvis, and Danny, I appreciate you guys making the time to, give me 2 hours of your Tuesday night. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Likewise, man. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Appreciate you, David.
We would love to have Serpa for part 2. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. We'll
fire it
At
up.
least the two.
Yeah, we'll make it happen.
I'll be looking forward to it, gents.
Thank you for tuning in, and make sure you hit up David's website and follow him. Get to watch his clips, get to hear from him more, and just stay tuned in. Thank you, and like we say always, peace be with you.
Appreciate it, guys.
Be with you.